Hey there, welcome to episode 52 of the Gig Loft podcast. I'm your host, Stevie Taylor. I'm very happy to see you here today and thank you for being here. Now, before we kick off the episode, here's a quick word from one of our sponsors. Nah, just kidding. We don't actually have any sponsors yet, but would you like to be a sponsor? If you have a related product or service that you'd like to reach hundreds of unique listeners per week, hit me up. Send me a message on the socials. Shoot me an email to thegiglifepodcast@gmail.com or via the contact page on the website, which is www.thegiglifepodcast.com. Anyways, on with the show. My guest today is Bobby Poulton. Bobby is a bass player from Sydney who's currently playing with Dami Im and is also a part of Frankie's world-famous house band. Now, some of his previous gigs are the Widowbirds, Battlesnake, Gilby Clarke, Jason Owen, Reece Mastin, Peter Northcote, the Sony Music All Stars, that's just to name a few. Bobby was also a guest on the Gig Life podcast Bass Players Roundtable, which we did a couple of months back. But it was really cool to get him back in here one-on-one into the studio where we talked about his current gigs, past gigs, his upbringing, basses, gear, streaming services, singing and much, much more. So now's the time to sit back and get comfortable. Now, if you're driving, wind down the window and turn it up so the car next to you can hear while I make this introduction. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Bobby Poulton. Cheers. I think we're rolling. Bobby Poulton, welcome back to the Gig Life podcast.
Thank you, Stevie.
Mate, for people that don't know, Bobby was here for the Gig Life podcast Bass Players Roundtable. And if you listened to that first episode, you would have heard that there was a systems malfunction for the first half hour of that. And a lot of that was actually Bobby talking a bit about the start of his career. So I felt a bit bummed out that that we lost all that, so it's good to have you back here and we can talk about that stuff again, you know.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Man, sweet air. So what have you been up to? We usually start it with what you're kind of up to now and then we'll roll it back.
Yeah, I am just about to do a national tour with Dami Im. That is going to be almost every weekend from the beginning of August until the middle of November.
Mm-hmm.
So that's...
Do you fly in, fly out type thing?
Yeah.
Doing the big towns and
there's a lot of regional as well.
Awesome.
But yeah, I mean that's going to be just all over. It's mainly in New South Wales actually, but we'll spend a couple of weekends out of town as well, you know, hitting the Perth and Brisbane and Melbourne, but yeah, it's mainly in New South Wales.
Right. So what does that show entail?
Well, I don't actually know all of that yet because we're going into rehearsals for that next week.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
So I have toured with her previously, and the previous tour was on the back of a Carpenters album that she had just recorded.
Right.
And that was mainly Carpenters material, and that was just amazing because, of course, the Carpenters are just such amazing songs. And but yeah, this next tour I think is going to be much more of her originals, and it's going to be much more like a pop focused show.
Correct me if I'm wrong. She was on X Factor?
Correct.
Right. And how long ago was that?
I am guessing.
Yep.
2013.
Okay, cool.
I actually don't watch television. So
right.
Yes, I
yeah, we don't watch a lot of commercial TV.
Yeah. the way I came into that gig was that I had a message from Michael Tan, who is her musical director, and he said, "How is it that we've got 600 mutual friends on Facebook, but we've never actually done a gig together?"
Right.
And we were kind of, and he said, "Can you come by the studio?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I drive over to King's Cross where Michael Tan's studio is, and he says, "Look, I've got this tour. It's with Dami Im. Do you know who she is?" And I was like, "No, sorry." And he said to me, "Well, I need a band who can sing. Do you sing?" And I was like, "Yes, I do sing." And he said, "Well, it's going to be mainly Carpenter's material. So there's going to be a lot of like quite large harmony stacks and all that kind of thing. Do you think you can do that?" And I was like, "Absolutely, that's no problem whatsoever." And so we were talking about all kinds of things that were going on at the day, and so politics and all this kind of thing. And we really sort of hit it off. And that was before she actually was selected as Australia's representative for the Eurovision Song Contest,
Right.
which she went on to do extremely well in. She came second in the year that she was there. So, yeah, I mean, that was, once that happened, the whole tour sold out. We ended up doing about 70 shows or something. Like It was a huge tour.
That's awesome. And, of course, most people probably know you've been doing Frankie's.
Yes.
Frankie's
The world famous house band.
Sorry about that. I'm going blank.
No, that's it.
It's been a long day.
Yeah, no, that's been going for 6.5 years.
Now am I right by saying that's the longest running rock residency in Australia?
The one that's certainly the longest running one that's currently going. As far as I'm aware, I think we are the longest running residency that has stayed in one venue in Australia or in Sydney at the moment. Maybe not Australia, I'm not sure. But
okay, cool.
Certainly we're the longest running residency that has stayed at one venue in Sydney.
That's bloody impressive.
Yeah.
And hats off to Frankie's, Still going strong. I had Dave Ferry on the show.
Yeah.
And he sort of spoke of how it kind of came about and a little bit the ins and outs of it. And yeah, it's cool, man.
Yeah, no, it's such a, I mean, that is really the place where I just get to play something that's completely different to everything else that's out there.
Right.
I guess. I mean, that's its real point of difference. It really is a rock and roll venue.
Right.
And there are places where you can play, very standard rock covers in general sort of pub gigs or whatever. But at that place, you can really do a deep dive into the back catalogues of artists that you wouldn't get to play anywhere else. And
so when you're selecting the material for the coming week, or you've got your up and coming guests, do you have to run that past anybody, or that's on you guys to?
No, it's
you know what I'm saying,
us. Yeah.
That's cool.
We're self curating.
That's it.
Our guitarist Joel, he's a bit disconnected from the professional music scene in the sense that he doesn't really do the standard cover gigs. So as a result, if there's something which lacks a bit of authenticity or credibility, he's the first one to say, no, let's not do that song or whatever. And it's actually really quite fun when I have done gigs with him that are sort of a bit more standard cover gigs, because the singer will call a song and he's just like, I'm not doing that. and it really is kind of like he's not that guy who he's a really, authentic rock and roller. And
awesome.
So, yeah.
That's cool, eh?
Yeah. It really does set it apart. It really does.
Right. So, I've always sort of seen you as the rock guy. I don't know much about what you've done before that or what else you do really, and that's why we're here today, and you're going to explain it. So how about we start rolling back to the early days? And were you originally from Sydney?
Yeah.
Okay.
I grew up very close to where I live right now, which is in Sydney's northern beaches.
Yep.
When I was very young, I used to take classical piano classes, and I hated them.
Yep.
I really disliked them. When I got into high school, it was my first opportunity to kind of branch away from classical music, because there was a jazz band for, you know, the people who had just entered high school. And so I joined that, but much to my chagrin, there were two other piano players who joined the exact same band. So, which meant that I either could play one in every 3 tunes, which I didn't like, or I was given 1/3 of the piano to play, which was awful.
Right.
And so the teacher was the guy who played bass. And I went up to him after a couple of weeks and just looked at him and I said, "Can I play that instead?" pointing at his bass guitar. And he looked at me and was like, "You will have to get lessons." And I was like, "Yes, that's fine. Just can I play this instead?"
Right.
And so he ended up teaching me. His name is Saul Richardson. I believe that you spoke to Dan about Saul Richardson, but he was the guy who took.
See the guy in St. Leonard's?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I do remember.
So he's
Dan telling me about him.
he's currently the owner of Jazz Workshop Australia, which is they do the jazz youth, the Australian Jazz Youth Orchestra and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Saul Richardson has gone on to become an excellent, jazz teacher.
Mm-hmm.
He was at the time, but he's just gone on to such larger and better things, I guess. I started playing bass from that moment, and I learnt to play the bass by playing jazz music. So it was playing big band jazz and small band jazz. I used to
only electric, or were you playing upright?
no,
Did you learn upright?
not upright at that point. I picked up
we'll get to
upright later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it was just electric bass. I actually I'd kind of always wanted to play the electric bass. The first time I became aware of electric bass, and I said this at the bass roundtable, was there was a television show back in the early 90s called Gladiators.
Yep. See, nobody would have heard this because this is the part
That's right,
where we had
yeah.
the equipment malfunction, and so you're hearing this for the first time.
Yeah, that's it. Well, yeah, the TV show.
Gladiators, that's right, I remember now.
Yeah, yeah, and that was it was a ridiculous television show, but I do remember when the contestants got knocked off the perch or whatever. If they got knocked off, they would play Another One Bites the Dust by Queen. And I remember at the time just thinking that is the coolest sound I've ever heard. And of course, it's that iconic John Deacon bass line, dom, 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 and it was absolutely magic. And so from that sort of point on, I was kind of always set on the bass guitar as something that I'd always wanted to get into. But I don't know, I didn't really feel like when I was that age, I could just ask my parents if I could play bass guitar for some reason. But, obviously once I did in high school, they were very happy to let me do so. So, yeah, that was...
So why was that? What was holding you back?
I don't know. I think I was just like, I'm a piano player. I just kind of self-identified as a piano player, and that was kind of limiting my ability to sort of move forward. So, but yeah, no, I didn't really sort of realize that I didn't enjoy playing piano until I really got into bass guitar, and I really took it on as my own sort of thing. Because playing piano, I did it because, I liked music and but I didn't really love it. Like, it was always my mother who would make me practice and all this kind of thing. It was never something I just picked up and did myself. I was far more interested in video games and all that other nonsense that you're interested in when you're a kid. So, so bass guitar, though, I totally took on myself. I suddenly was putting on all the records and all that kind of thing. My father was a massive music lover, and he had an enormous record collection of 7-inch singles and of especially 7-inch singles. I'm not sure to what degree this is true, but I remember either him or my mother telling me that there was a period of years where he bought every single single that entered the Australian top 40.
Really?
Yeah. And so he had thousands upon thousands of 12-inch singles. I'm sorry, 7-inch singles. And he had a few LPs, but he wasn't as into the LPs as he was into the singles. So I grew up next to his turntable and these excellent, 7-inch singles that were spinning all the time. And so he used to make cassette tapes for me of all the pop music that he was into, and he was massively into, ABBA and Nat King Cole and Patsy Cline, but then also all the music of the time. I really sort of got into music I used to get up every single Saturday and Sunday morning at 5:30 or 6:30 in the morning or whatever it was and watch the Rage Top 40 front to back. And so my musical upbringing that I really loved was really just pop music. I absolutely loved pop music. The first video that I remember seeing, because I was like 4 years old at the time, but it was a song by Tiffany called I Think We're Alone Now.
I know the song.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I remember waking up one morning and turning on the TV because I was looking for cartoons, but that song came on.
Yep.
And I remember, like, because I pressed the wrong button instead of pressing the Channel 7 button, I pressed the Channel 2 button or something like that. And that song came and I was like, what is this? When I was 4 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just sat down and watched the top 40 from front to back.
Right.
And so and I started doing that every week for years and years and years. So all of the music from the late 80s through all the way through the 90s, I knew all the pop songs.
Right. So were you trying to play along to that stuff?
No.
Just-
I think this was, I'd very much had, for some reason in my mind, I had disconnected playing music with listening to music.
Right.
Yeah, which is an unusual thing because now it's all I do, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
First time that I liked a song that my dad disliked too, because that was November Rain by Guns N' Roses.
Didn't you like that?
No, my
your
dad
dad,
didn't like
right.
it. My dad
Right.
didn't like it, but I thought it was fantastic.
Right.
Because I don't think he liked Axl Rose's
The
voice.
Matt song. Black, doom,
Yeah.
doom, doom, doom.
Yeah, all the Pat Boone, Debbie Boones. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was, and so that was, I guess, the point of divergence of because, you know, when you're a kid, you just want to like the same things as your dad likes. You want to like like his music. You want to like what football teams or whatever he follows. You want to, you know, like all the same things. But yeah, obviously, as I'm watching music, there's music that I just think is fantastic. But you know, that's not good. You know, that's not good music.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was my early entry into music.
Yeah, that's cool. You just said Pat Boone, Debbie Boone.
Yeah,
Now, I'm really intrigued by that.
yeah.
Do you do that often with a type of fill that you want somebody to play, or you know what I mean? I've never heard that before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I never heard it.
Oh,
Yeah. It's a
Pat
drug-
Boone, Debbie Boone,
No,
bucket of fish, you know, all that
I
kind
know
of thing.
exactly, but I've never heard that before.
Oh, yeah. No, I can't remember.
I've got to
where
get
heard
out
that
of my
before.
cave, man.
Yeah. No, that's
Boone, Debbie Boone. That's exactly it.
yeah.
It's like those oh yeah, there's all those different ones. I think they've done a McDonald's one for all the notations,
Oh, really?
like hamburger.
Hamburger.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Goodness me.
Yeah. Fillet of fish.
Oh, that makes perfect
Yeah,
sense.
it
Fillet
does.
of fish. Fillet of fish.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh.
Pat Boone, Debbie Boone. I'm never going to forget that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how far into, from a grade perspective, did you go with piano?
Oh, fourth grade. I think
Right.
I got out of it because there was a point where I think for my fifth grade exam, my teacher had forgotten to submit my application. And so my mother was livid. And so I just thought, oh, perfect excuse. I get to drop it.
Right.
Because by then I'd already started playing I'd started playing the bass and I was really into that.
Right.
I mean, and also I was sort of discovering my own sort of musical thing as well. I mean, as I've said, up until that point, I just loved pop music. But then I'd given my mate from school gave me a cassette and I used to listen to cassettes front to back. So I'd put one record on one side and another record on the other side. But my friend gave me a cassette it was Led Zeppelin 4 on one side and Black Sabbath Paranoid on the other side. Now, I'd encountered a bit of rock music, just that which appears on, you know, the Australian top 40. But that was just something else. I mean, as far as classic rock, like I'd obviously gotten into Queen because of the Another One Bites the Dust bass riff. But Queen are a band that are they are like a pop-based band. They're not really like a blues-based band. And obviously with Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, they're very much rooted in the blues. And I'd just never heard anything like that before in my life. Right. And so I think I was doing a paper round at the time and man, that 90-minute cassette, which was 45 minutes on each side, it got played front to back. And, you know, obviously like Led Zeppelin people call them a rock and roll or a heavy metal band. Like they're really not. They really are like a blues folk band. They just hit hard, and that's the
blues, folk, rhythm and blues.
Yeah,
Bonham's,
that's it.
Bonham's drumming, you know.
Yeah, they really have sort of stolen a lot from old, the blues and from the old soul and gospel songs, and they've just kind of appropriated them into their own sort of brand of jams and music. But it was just unlike anything I'd ever heard.
Yep.
And so that kind of led me on to the whole sort of rock and roll.
Right. So did this sort of start you into your first sort of band at that stage, or you were just discovering it on your own?
Yeah, no, I was discovering it on my own.
Yep.
I did have, everyone has high school bands.
That's
but,
what I'm asking. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
nothing really that stuck. I had a high school band with a chap by the name of Michael Solo, and he's now the drummer in probably the top corporate band in Sydney. They're called Furnace and the Fundamentals. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but they're a corporate band who sell out the Enmore Theatre. Shit. Yeah, they are huge, like absolutely huge. There was the singer in that band was also a guy by the name of David Berry, and David Berry is now a very quite a famous actor. He was in Outlander, and he's been in other sort of television shows. But right. And then the violin player, also that one of the guitarists was a violin player who's now in a New York band called Miracles of Modern Science.
Right.
So that high school band ended up being quite like a prolific. It launched the careers of several different people. I don't think we ever had a name though. I can't remember.
Right.
But yeah, no, I didn't really sort of get into bands until after I'd finished high school. So when throughout high school, I was playing jazz. I was very much not really ever. I wasn't really like a jazz fan. Like I didn't really put on jazz records. I mean, I had a few. Like I had some Duke Ellington records and some Count Basie records. The records that I always had were always the big bands. They were never Miles Davis or the Dizzy Gillespie. I had a bebop record actually, which I really loved. But yeah, no, I was never really the jazz music never grabbed me the way that pop music and rock and roll did. So yeah, in my later high school days, I even sort of started getting into heavy metal music as well. But that I got tired with reasonably quickly. So
why is that?
As I started with Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, which I still really love, but I really sort of went into that sort of European sort of thing, which I remember listening to a band, I can't remember what they were called, but that was like everything was perfect. The playing was just perfect. The everything was beautifully in time. Everything was just magic, and I was like, there is nothing cool about this. I hate this, and then stopped listening to metal for like years and years.
Right.
So I mean, that was a bad reaction, I guess. But
right. I kind of feel that a little bit about Dream Theater these days.
Yeah, so Dream Theater
I
probably
used to
would have been.
Love Dream Theater during Mike Portnoy's time with them. Yeah, but yeah, once that sort of change happened, it just became too perfect. And I think the last two albums I've listened to them, I've only gone through once.
Yeah,
and
right.
I'm not going to go back because there's not one song that. I mean, of course, technically they're brilliant and sonically it's cool, but that's it. That's it for me. Yeah, I don't dig it, man.
I was never a Dream Theater fan.
Yeah, right.
At all.
Right.
I liked one of their keyboard players, Derek Shrunian.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I actually quite liked some of his solo material.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, like nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, Mike Portnoy did a series of awesome cover shows, and he put together bespoke bands.
Yeah.
They're fantastic.
Yeah.
Especially as one he did for The Who. That one was amazing.
Yeah, right.
Have you seen that one?
I don't think I have, no.
Oh, it's incredible. It's worth seeing.
Yeah,
so,
right.
yes.
And he's got winery dogs now, eh?
Yeah.
It's killer.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Cool. Now let's talk about your sort of transition. Well, not transition, but bringing in the double bass.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I left high school, I was invited by Saul Richardson once again to be a part of a community big band that was playing quite near where I used to live, and so we were doing gigs somewhat regularly. It was just all sort of volunteer stuff at the time, but that was awesome. So I was playing lots and lots of jazz. I ended up buying an upright bass because I thought, well, if I'm going to start doing this, that's right. Okay, I remember now. I wanted to go to the Conservatorium of Music to do the jazz performance course. Mm-hmm. What happened was that I went in to do, they had some sort of like pre-audition things where you could sort of do a mock audition to see like, is this the kind of thing that you should be doing or not? And so I did, and they were very sort of receptive towards me at the time, but they said, you might have some trouble getting in on electric bass. It'd be worth having the upright bass up your sleeve. Right. So I went and bought one. And I just sort of started having a sort of a play around on it. It was set up for bow playing, though. And bow playing is very different. Arco playing is very different to pizzicato playing. And obviously when you're playing jazz music, you're playing pizzicato style. Yeah. Can you explain the setup difference then? Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the arco playing, they generally have a much higher action. The actual board is the fretboard, or whatever you call it, the fingerboard is planed into a different shape as well. There's like a hard edge on one of the strings, underneath one of the strings, and it's just set up much higher. And it was almost impossible to play. So I actually didn't really. So I bought it and then sort of put it off to the side, and then didn't really touch it again. But then went and did my audition for the con. They gave me the marks to get in, and I was like, oh great. So I went and sort of met some people who I would have been going with, and they were all like, like what records do you listen to? What jazz records do you listen to? And I remember thinking at the time, I actually don't play jazz. Yeah. Right. I don't listen to jazz. Yep. And they were like, oh, what are you doing here then? And at the time I was thinking, you're actually right. I really don't want to spend 4 years and spend however many, $60,000 or whatever, getting a piece of paper that says I know how to play jazz, when I actually don't actually. It's not really something that really moves me or I really love, even though like I do, like I love jazz, but it's not something that has really sort of moved me. My move in the same way that pop music or rock and roll does. So. Yeah, I actually bought the double bass and then sort of put it off to the side for many years. I tried to sell it a couple of times, but I didn't. The offers that I had for it, I was never really happy with. It wasn't until I had started playing professionally again, and quite a few of the gigs were, there's a dinner set. Do you have an upright bass? I was like, actually, yes, I do. So I just started taking it along to gigs, and I relearned how to use it. So I went and got it reset up for pop play or for jazz playing and all that kind of thing. So suddenly I had an instrument that I could actually play, as opposed to something that sat in the thing that I just couldn't play it. So I mean, it's kind of always been in the background, but it wasn't something that I'd ever really given proper time to. Right. How often does that come out now? It will come out on this Dami Im tour. Oh, cool! It'll come out for that. Awesome. Because she has got a jazz crossover record that we'll be doing a few songs off. Oh, great! So I'll be bringing it out for that. Generally speaking, it comes out when there's dinner sets for gigs that I'm doing for like corporates and weddings and that kind of thing. Okay. Especially if they're outdoors, you're often doing the upright thing then. Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not as good an upright player as I am a electric bass player. Yeah. I'm better at synth than I am at upright bass. Right, I gotcha. Yeah, the synth. I was going to ask you about synth soon, but yeah. So now knowing a little bit about your sort of piano history, it kind of all makes sense now, Yeah. Well, the synth thing was, once again, pop music. I went and got some DVDs. This would have been 10 years ago of. Lady Gaga, of Katy Perry, of Rihanna, all those real like massive pop superstars. And because I'd seen some of their concerts, and I went to Lady Gaga with my wife, and the band were just amazing. Yep. And so I went and got a bunch of these DVDs, and I noticed that all all the bass players were also doubling up on key bass. And so I went and bought a synth, and I just started asking around, do you know any other bass players who do the key bass thing?
Yeah.
And at the time, I couldn't find anyone, except for then one time the one guy who does it was Ralph Marshall.
Okay.
Now, do you know Ralph?
No.
Okay. So I didn't know Ralph at all, but I just sent him a message and said to him, "Hey man, he's an incredible electric bass player, synth bass player, upright bass player, singer, incredible." And I said, "Hey man, I'm sort of starting to get into this key bass thing. Can you give me any tips?" He came back and said, "Here's my telephone number. Here's my address. Come round." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, are you serious?" And so I drove round to his place, and I took the synth that I just bought, which is a little Roland synth. It's still the one I take out everywhere. It's called a little Roland Gaia. Great synth for just really easily. You can easily make patches on this particular little bass patches on this little synth. And so he sort of showed me, look, this is where you got to start from. You want to start from this sort of sonic palette, and then you can adjust from here. And he was showing me all the different sort of patches that he has. And I tried to recreate some of his great sounding bass patches on my synth. And yeah, so he really sort of showed me about how to create bass patches. And I've created so many great bass patches over the years now.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember there's a couple of shows that I've done which I've been able to really dial in the perfect sounds for. So I remember doing a Madonna show and really dialing in all those exact bass sounds off on this little synth.
Right.
Yeah.
First time I ever saw someone playing a synth bass was Byron, and I can't remember his last name. He was in the first series of The Voice, and also played with John Butler.
But Byron Loitus?
Loitus, yeah. We went to the Mac one night to see Professor Groove, and half of Professor Groove didn't turn up, so this other band sort of came in, and he was just sitting there on his, he had a little 210, and he had his head was sitting next to it, and he just had this little, I don't know if it was a mini Moog or something like that. He wasn't even watching it, man. He's just looking around, just playing this. I thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah,
like,
right.
oh, look, keyboard player. But then he'd pull out his bass and start playing another song, and then just pop that down and play this synth bass. I thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
It would have been, how long ago? 12, 13 years ago, I reckon.
Yeah, right.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at the time, it obviously wasn't a very popular thing because at the time, the only person who I could even get a recommendation for was Ralph Marshall, and Ralph Marshall's fantastic. But since then, I've seen a lot of working players pick it up. So it really has become much more of a thing.
So definitely a part of an arsenal now, eh?
Oh,
something
yeah.
you definitely pack in your car and
Definitely.
gives you extra gigs, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
But also, I mean, it was really good because when I started doing it, I'd just sort of I'd always have it in the car so that if I ever had songs that I could play on the synth, I'd bring it out for those songs. I mean, that was definitely it just, if you can practice playing songs on the gig, it really forces you to do them right the first time.
Gotcha.
I think the first synth gig I ever did was probably not a very good one, but it really was one of those things where you've got to do it.
Yep.
You've really got to do it. You can practice in your bedroom until you're perfect, but at the end of the day, you've really just got to get into it.
Yep. All right, let's talk about going professional. When was that? Oh, sorry. So before you went professional as a musician, did you have any other job?
Yeah.
You've been employed.
Yeah. So I was working in a music store. I used to work at Allen's at
did you?
over on Pitt Street.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yep.
So
I might have bought that from you. I bought that from Allen's. Yeah.
you probably bought it from me because I used to sell a lot of basses.
Yeah, that was would have been, when was my daughter born? 2009.
Yeah.
2008.
I would have been working there at the time.
Yeah, right. I probably bought that from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I worked at Allen's for about 6 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so, oh, goodness me. So, leading up to this, I left I was in that community big band. I stopped doing that and I did an audio engineering degree. Now, the reason why I started doing that was because I learnt very quickly that I would enjoy a gig more if it sounded good than if I liked the music.
Mm-hmm.
Now makes
perfect sense.
Yeah, so I was seeing bands that I really liked, but they had an ordinary sound.
Yep.
And then I'd go and see another gig of a band that I wasn't that into, but the sound was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I absolutely loved that. So I went and did an audio engineering, just the diploma though, not the full on. But then I learnt about all like, sonic space, equalization,
Mm-hmm.
compression, recording to tape, recording to Pro Tools, all that kind of thing.
Where was that?
I was at SAE.
Okay, cool.
That was back in 2004.
Right.
At the time, I needed a band to record an assignment, and I had come across Joel and Jordan from who I now play with in Frankie's world famous house band. Yes, and I just called them one day and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a band to record. I'd love to record you guys. Would you be into that?" And at the time, Joel, who I spoke to, said, "I've actually been trying to get your telephone number, but I didn't have it. I'm so glad that you called because, would you like to get together and we'll jam on some things and maybe we can record this stuff together?" So we started, and then we started a band that became Torch Le Monde, which were like an alternative alternative rock band.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great band at the time.
Mm.
And we went over. We did American tours and all that kind of thing.
Great.
We ended up by the time I left that band, we were at the stage where we were selling out about 600 seat sort of places. So like we did I think the last big show I did was at the Gaelic Club. So whatever that capacity was, maybe 500 or 400 or 500.
Right.
Yeah. So that was that was great. But then I left that band and I got this job at the music store doing just selling guitars, and the guitar tech there was the great and powerful Les Rankin. Do you know Les Rankin?
I don't know him personally. I know who he is. Yeah,
he is the guy who makes every single guitarist in Sydney's guitar work. He is just the go-to guy, and so he was the guitar tech, the in-house tech at Allen's on Pitt Street. And he calls me one day and he says, "You're going to get a phone call in 10 minutes from Peter Northcote. He's looking for a bass player." And I was like, goodness me. All right. Mm-hmm. So sure enough, I get a phone call and Pete says, "G'day, Bobby. Look, can you come down for an audition tomorrow?" And he's like, and I was like, "Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, what do you want me to bring?" "Oh, just bring a bass. Just bring a bass." So I go down to his studio, and he's, and I'd encountered Pete before, because he used to get his stuff done by Les as well. And so I go down to his studio, and he welcomes me in, and he says, "Look, I'm just looking for a bass player who doesn't mess things up at the end of the day."
Straight up. Yep.
That's all I'm looking for, because he was still very much at that time pushing his original music. Mm-hmm. And so he said, "All right, here we go. Can you play me some Time?" And I was like, "Okay." And he said, "Just some eights." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "Yep, stop. That's great. Okay, what chord am I playing?" And he plays a C. And I was like, "Oh, that's a C major." And he goes, and he plays another chord. "Oh, that's a D over F sharp. Great. Okay, great. Can you just play me this riff?" And he plays a riff. And so I played it back for him, and he's like, "Great. Let's jam." And he starts sort of we played like over a funky blues thing. He goes, "Stop. Do you want a gig?" And I was like, "Sure." He's like, "Great, you're in my band."
Cool.
And that was where I met Dave Ferry as well.
Right.
Sorry, that wasn't where I met Dave Ferry. Torch Le Monde and his Kings, Queens and Fairy Tales band used to do gigs together, but that was when I started playing with Dave.
Yep.
But that was amazing. So played in Peter Northcote's band we were doing gigs reasonably regularly for about 2 years with his original music.
Yeah, right.
And that was excellent. That was where I met Bryden Stace, who is one of the great vocalists of in this country. He's now just moved back to the UK. And that was where I I met Dave. So the jump to professional was we were at dinner one day after a gig with Pete, and Pete was like, "Mate, you are the kind of player who could do this full time. You are wasting away in that shop. Commit to it, and it will come to you." And I was really freaking out because, of course, you enjoy that extra money and you regularly appearing in your bank account. And we're at Japanese dinner, and he picks up the fish and he makes the fish go, "Bobby, you need to leave your job and become a professional musician." And I'm just there laughing. And I was like, all right, great, I'll do it. And so I quit my job and started playing full time. Now, obviously you had to build up a reputation from there. So that took a bit of time, and I was
that scary?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
Were you married at the time?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was married. I think I was married for about a year by the time I went full-time musician. So, there was still, rent to pay and all that kind of thing. And and I think we'd just found out that we were pregnant with my first child. Right. So
a little bit of extra pressure.
Yes, but once again, had to get into it. And when I first started playing professionally, I discovered quite quickly that all the gigs, there was about 50 songs in the Sydney repertoire, quote unquote.
Yeah, right.
That they were the set sort of repertoire.
The Sydney staples.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, after playing those 50 songs hundreds of times, I remember sort of thinking, wow, I can do more than this. And that was how the Frankie's band sort of came about.
Right.
I thought, right, if I can get Dave and Joel, because I'd played with Dave in Pete's band and I'd played with Joel in Torch Lamond, I was like, that could be a band that really works well together. And so I went over to Dave's house and said, "Mate, what do you think about starting a band that has a new repertoire of predominantly rock and roll music as opposed to the sort of more R&B based soul music that is predominantly, the most of the gigs in Sydney, and still is, and it's great music." But I was just like, yeah, let's sort of move away from this just for a gig. And he was into it, and so I said, all right, I'm going to call Joel, see if he's into it, and Joel was into it. We got together, and it just gelled straight away. So we were together. We did maybe 3 or 4 jams before we started playing regularly at Frankie's.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Now, just on Frankie's, you bought me a little present.
I did.
Right. So let's talk about this for a second.
This is...
So in my hand, it's a Frosty's Pale Ale. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
So this
brew?
This is the brew that is the in-house brew. This one is the in-house lager. Oh, sorry, the in-house ale. They've also got a lager called Sydney Draft, and this is the ale that is the in-house ale at Frankie's.
Right.
As in, it's made specifically for Frankie's. It's now starting to get out there into other bars as well. So it's at the Hideaway, and it's at the it's at the Dock, and it's at there's a few little places that are starting to carry this. But It's such a great beer. It's not like it's not a craft like really pretentious beer.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yep.
It's just a really great, crack it open.
I'm going to crack it open.
See what you think. There we go. Oh, mate.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's great.
It's really nice.
So Jordan, the pretty much the mastermind behind Frankie's Pizza by the Slice, he was the guy who invented that particular brew. Oh,
right.
Yeah. So, and I believe that that's going to start rolling out to more and more places.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Frankie's has become a world famous venue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they get some massive artists there to do secret shows and one-off shows and all that kind of thing.
Phil and Selmo was there not long ago, eh?
That's right.
I saw the videos of that.
That was
They might have been
hilarious.
from you.
Yeah,
Did you have some side of stage videos?
I did. Yeah,
Fuck, they
Yeah.
look crazy, man. People
was
trying to
amazing.
jump those barriers and
Yeah.
security. Oh, whoa.
that was from the side of stage. I found
Yeah.
that so entertaining. It was
Yeah.
like watching live
Yeah,
human
yeah,
pinball
yeah.
because they were coming over and the security guards were just pushing
Throwing
them
them
right
back.
back.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was hilarious. But I remember the moment that I sort of was like, wow, this is incredible. It was when I went to see Skid Row there and the bass player, Rachel Bolan, he gets on the mic and he says, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but when it comes to famous, historic rock and roll venues, people talk about CBGB's, they talk about the Whiskey A Go-Go in LA, and they talk about Frankie's Pizza in Sydney.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
And we were just like, whoa, that's amazing. So,
Right.
I mean, wherever I go worldwide now, people talk about Frankie's Pizza, and
That's great.
they know all about it.
Yep.
I mean,
And it's a stop too, isn't it? Dave was telling me, like when bands come through town on
absolutely.
show, yeah, that's the place to go.
Absolutely, the number of musicians who I've met there over the years. I remember there was one. Remember the heavy metal festival Soundwave?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember there was one year that it had just all finished up, and all the bands ended up at Frankie's afterwards. And so I'm on stage playing, and as I look out, I can see there's Green Day, there's Korn, there's Avenged Sevenfold, there's Five Finger Death Punch. Like they were all just there, and it was surreal. I mean, some of the just the sheer number of musicians who we've played in front of, and some like bona fide superstars.
Yeah, yeah.
Who come in and they always love the band. They always love the band, and we've like over the years we've picked up some killer gigs.
Yeah.
Doing that. You know, we've been the bands that people have taken us out on the road and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Dave explained it as like Frankie's its own little ecosystem within itself,
Yeah. Well, it just is. It was so different to anything else that Sydney has experienced for probably many years. That when it first opened, it was simply a fantasy land. Like just everyone was there every night of the week. I mean, like it was so new, it was so exciting. It still is. I mean, it just is. It's just a place that people want to be. I mean, on any given Monday, I mean, Monday is still the quietest night of the week. I mean, when we first went there, they actually said to us, "Oh, we want you to play on Mondays because that's our quiet night. Every other night of the week we're packed." And so Mondays we're just and so when we started playing on Mondays, immediately people started coming, on any given Monday we'll have 100, 150, 200 people there.
That's great.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it seems like that little rock scene is starting to grow again in Sydney.
Yeah.
You've got Frankie's, of course. You've got Rambling Rascals.
Yeah.
You've got the Hideaway Bar now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Hideaway Bar's been there for a while.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
just-
since Damo.
Yeah, Damo's now got a hold of it.
He's sort of, it's starting to have a little bit more of a profile. I
God
think.
bless him, yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
He's a dude.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's all starting to come around. The Crowbar, who are a Brisbane mob, have they bought the old Bald-Faced Stag, and they've redone that. That's
Right.
now like a pretty serious live venue. They've got heaps of touring bands coming through there.
Right.
Yeah, like Sydney really is
Still
sort
no
of-
pokies in there, eh?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Cool, eh?
I mean, none of the venues that I've just mentioned have pokey. Like, I mean, they seem to, pinball's becoming a thing though.
Pinball, yeah.
Yeah, people are sort of doing the pinball thing. But yeah, no, pokies really are a thing of the past. Like
Yeah.
as far as
As far as those kind of venues.
any venue that wants any vibe, as soon as you put pokies in there, you have immediately like raised the white flag in defeat. You really
Yeah,
have.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, no, there are so many great venues in Sydney to play now. I really don't get the doom and gloom that seems to be so pervasive in the industry.
Yeah, it's only really a handful of people, eh?
Probably. They're noisy.
Based on who I've chatted with, which it's not that many people, but yeah, everybody's got something going on except this handful of people that think it's never going to change and that they're waiting for it to be like it used to be, but it never will.
You know?
Yeah, no, change is important, and
Of course,
change is always coming. I'm actually I'm writing a paper at the moment on streaming services.
I saw your Facebook post today.
Yeah,
Yeah. So are you? Was that to try and get a little bit more information for your paper?
yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah. So
Cool.
that was just to sort of get a. I've written a few things over the months about it, but yeah, I'm finding that I reckon that streaming services are absolutely going to save the recorded music industry.
Right.
You know, from the recorded music industry was pretty much on a constant sort of general upward trend from the 1950s up until 1999.
Yep.
Then in 1999, from 2000 till 2015, it was on a constant downward trend. The reason why 1999 was the peak, that was the year that Napster was
yep.
released.
Yep.
Then it went gradually down, which the downward was slow, but generally downward. I think it probably halved in value, or maybe even more over that 15-year period. But it's only taken 3 years to make up 10 years worth of losses. So the 2018 recorded music revenue was back up to the 2005 levels. So in Australia, that's about $530 million.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's still not up to the 1999 peak, but the exponential rate at which streaming services are growing, I reckon we're going to overtake that.
Right. Who's getting that money though? Because the artists aren't, are they?
Yeah, no, they will, because because the streaming services take about between 25 and 30% cut, which is exactly what the record stores used to take back in the day.
Right.
So they used to take about a 30% margin, or 25 to 30% margin, and then all the rest of that money is then passed on to people who are the recording owners and the songwriters. And so the interesting thing about streaming services also is that they not only pay a mechanical royalty, which is what usually CDs would pay out, because a mechanical royalty is when you're, a song doesn't exist. It's like an immaterial idea, let's say. But if you make that into a physical product, like a CD or a piece of sheet music, or that mechanical process of it becoming a thing, the songwriter gets a royalty. So, that's the way that works. And then there's also performance royalties, which is like when your song is played on radio, it's not reproduced into a physical form like a CD, but it's being communicated. So that gets a performance royalty.
Right.
With streaming services, they have to pay both a mechanical and a mechanical and a performance royalty. So
on every stream.
Yeah. So they should actually so songwriters should start seeing a double portion of royalties.
Right.
They should.
They should, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously still, I mean.
And when should they be starting to see this?
Well, once the big bad wolf in the whole thing at the moment is free tiers and ad-supported tiers.
Right.
Ad-supported tiers are absolutely terrible. I mean, right now worldwide there are about 100 million Spotify paid subscribers, but there are 217 million active monthly users. And so more than half of the people who are streaming music are doing so for free or on an ad-supported basis. And ad-supported streams, the revenue that's generated from ad-supported streams is minuscule compared to that which is comes through the paid subscriptions.
Yeah, so when you say ad-supported stream, that's your free.
That's the free tiers,
Spotify.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you're on free Pandora, or you listen to music through YouTube, that's a killer. That's an absolute killer.
Yeah.
Just pay for a Spotify or an Apple Music is even better. The Apple Music. I put a link on one of my posts a while ago. The number of streams, of paid streams, it takes to earn $1, and on Apple Music it was about 75 streams. If your song is streamed 75 times, you'll earn $1. But if your song is streamed 135 times on Spotify, you'll earn $1. So it is almost double.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not exactly sure why that is. I think that Apple Music pay out a higher mechanical or performance royalty. It's one of those. It's one of those two. But I've got a link to that. Maybe I'll put that so you can get that in the show notes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One of the top ones, I believe, is Tidal. Is that right?
Yeah, Tidal's really good. The actual believe it or not,
that's Jay-Z, isn't it? That's Jay-Z's company. Yeah, right. Yep.
Believe it or not, the best paying out streaming service is Napster.
Is that right?
Yeah. They've relaunched. I mean, I think that all the streaming services are actually losing money, which is, I don't know how that works, but I haven't gotten into it that far yet. But I intend to find out why that's a thing.
Interested.
But what we should start to see happening quite soon is that once the legislation is in place, because it needs to be regulated, because at the moment, people can listen to music for free. Once the legislation's is in place, you should see songwriters being properly paid for the songs that they're writing and recording rights. So if you're an indie band and you've recorded your own songs and released it, then you should start getting paid out properly. Obviously, still if you're with a record label and you're signed to a publisher and you've got all those publishing deals and your record deals, that's going to be still much harder to sort of earn that. Obviously, you're not going to be earning $1 for 75 streams on Apple Music, or you're not going to be earning $1 for 135 streams on Spotify. But
your record company is.
Yeah, your record company, and they pay you out your royalties still. Depending on what your publishing is and what your record deal is. But yeah. I mean, I reckon it's a fascinating
Totally.
thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I thought it was all doom and gloom, to be honest. Till you've told me about that today.
No,
it's really exciting.
People always conflate streams with sales. Now,
I understand.
So a platinum record in Australia was 70,000 sales, I think, 70,000 sales, whereas a song in the top, a song in the top, 20 or whatever would be getting 125,000 streams per day in Australia, just in Australia.
Right.
So, and that's built up over time.
Yeah.
Streaming, once everyone gets onto paying for a subscription, it really is going to move forward. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I'm with Apple Music.
Yeah.
The reason that being, having used Macs for a long time, and I've got a massive iTunes library. All my CDs are on iTunes.
Yeah, great.
Having the Apple Music, it's just a push button between Apple Music and my library.
Yeah.
Instead of having to go into another app, having my iTunes stuff in one app and then going into.
I'm exactly the same. I mean, I initially went with Apple Music just because literally it appeared on my telephone one day. It said 3 months free, and I was like, sure. And of course, I mean, Apple Music actually had a massive publicity bump when Taylor Swift said, "I'm so disappointed in you, Apple, that you're not going to pay out your songwriters for that first 3 months." And Apple came back and were like, "Yeah, no, actually, you're right. We are going to pay them."
Yeah.
And
we need you, Taylor.
Yeah.
Hey.
And so then, of course, what happened was all these that actually started like a bit of like a cascading effect where there was some publishing houses that had these huge stables of artists who they weren't going to put on streaming services. Suddenly, all those publishing houses suddenly were like, oh, actually, Apple Music have got the right idea. We're going to put our artists on Apple Music, and so it really was kind of a bit of a bump for them. But yeah, I mean, just recently in the United States, Trump has just signed the Music Modernization Act into law, which is going to come into effect. I've forgotten the exact things that does, but that's a very good thing for songwriters,
right?
And for producers as well. Yeah, that's if that filters down through the rest of the world, that'll be very good. And because obviously a lot of the energy in the music industry comes from the United States of America, hopefully that will filter through to other markets as well.
Fascinating, man. Yeah, I can't wait to see what happens with this.
Yeah.
Now, singing. When did you start singing?
Oh, I used to do. I used to just do backing vocals for bands that I
Yep.
was in. I don't think I was. I think I was when I was younger. I used to think I had a bad singing voice, especially after, once your voice is broken and it changes and all that kind of thing. And I could never really sound the way I wanted to. It wasn't until like really the last sort of few years that I've really gotten into it. And I absolutely love singing.
Cool.
I sing lead vocals on a range of songs now. I'm taking some vocal lessons with Stephen Baker. Who's a great vocal teacher, and I really enjoy singing. My Sunday gig is actually MDing a evening church service for an Anglican church, and so that is I'm singing lead vocals for all that kind of thing, and that's
awesome.
amazing, because then you're actually leading. You're not just sort of singing by yourself. You're leading, like 50, 60 odd people in singing, and that's just great fun.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, but singing is such a feather in the cap if you're an instrumentalist.
Yep.
I mean, it really is the difference sometimes between you getting hired and not hired. I mean, so as I mentioned before, the reason why I'm in Dami Im's band was because I could sing and play bass.
Yeah.
And you've spoken to Victor before. Victor's an incredible singer and bass player. I mean, singing and playing is almost essential now.
Yeah.
Do you do any singing?
I do BVs.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of songs that I've sort of sung solo on, but that particular band I'm no longer with.
Sure.
I sung on all my EP, obviously.
Oh, great. Yeah,
and all my BVs and yeah. I'll give you a link to it.
Yeah, great.
Now, I saw on your Facebook you were endorsed by Fender.
Yes.
Right. Cool. And you were. I saw one little video you put up. You're trying to work out jazz bass or P bass, and you put them next to each other, and one of them rolled over.
Oh, mate, no, I'm definitely like a P bass guy.
Okay.
I have been for a long time.
Yeah, I haven't got my fingers aren't long enough for a P bass.
When I started, when I started playing bass, I always played Yamaha basses, not for any particular reason. They were just the ones I happened to buy.
Okay.
But the more that I was playing, and I was playing in studio situations and that kind of thing with bands that I was in, the producers would often say to me, "Do you have a Fender?" Right. And it happened more than once. Like, it happened 2 or 3 or 4 times even from several different producers. And I was like, why are they always asking me to play a Fender? Anyway, one of the US tours that I did, I just didn't take a bass. I took a wad of cash and intended to buy a bass over there. Right. And so I went to a guitar center in Los Angeles, and I tried out a bunch of different basses, not just Fenders, but a whole bunch, but definitely came away from that with a Fender Precision bass.
Right.
And, that fast forward a few years, I was actually in a band called the Widowbirds, which unfortunately they're no longer going, but they were a fantastic band. And
Simon Malley,
Tony Kvesic and
Shane O'Neill.
Yep. That's it, Steel O'Neill. So yeah, that was a great band. But I actually was doing a gig with them, and I just decided for whatever reason to do a gig with my Rickenbacker. And while I'm at this gig, a representative from Fender comes up to me and says, "Hi, I know that you usually play Fenders. We'd actually like for you to come on board." And I laughed.
Wow.
I said, "Wow, what are the chances? The one gig that I decided to bring my Rickenbacker out to, you've decided to come and sign me up." So I went in there and I went in there, and they were just so beautiful. They said, "What would you like?" And I said, "Oh, I definitely want like a precision bass." And so they pulled out every single model of precision bass for me, and the one that I chose, it ended up being a custom shop model. It was called the 59 Journeyman, and then once I'd chosen that one, they pulled out every single instance of that bass that they had, and so they said, like, which one would you like? And I played them all, and the one that I got was just the magic bass. I mean, I've had several other bass players play it, and they just go, "Oh, mate, this is magic."
Wow.
So it's a really special bass. It's my 95% bass. I play that a lot. All the Frankie's gigs. I've got about 7 basses all up. I've got my Fender Precision. I've got a Fender Jazz, obviously, which is the Flea model, which is that's a great bass too. I actually went back to Fender and said I want a jazz bass, and at the time I just didn't quite have the funds to really sort of get a custom shop model. But of all the basses, I played a couple of custom shop models. That Flea one was actually the closest to the custom shop models.
Right,
so
right.
I in feel and sound, when I buy basses, I generally don't plug them in. Because if I don't like the way they sound plugged in, I can generally
you can change that, can't you?
you can change your pickups and all that kind of thing. I'm always just about the
feel,
the wood and the neck, the body, the feel, and how it sounds acoustically. Because if you get a great sounding bass acoustically, then you can get a great sounding bass when you plug it in. And so, that was the best one. I mean, I've got a Music Man Stingray. Yeah, one of the classic models, not one of the new ones. The new ones have 3-band EQ. The old ones have the 2-band EQ.
Right.
I really love the ones with the 2-band EQ. I've got a Maton bass called a JB4, which was a classic bass in the 80s.
Electrical or
electric bass? Electric bass.
Right.
Yeah, that was the bass that was used by heaps and heaps of those pub rock bands like Ganga Jang and Goanna and Avion and a lot of bands from the 80s in Australia. Violent Femmes were massive players of this bass. I've got an old Ibanez from 1981, which is called a musician bass.
Right.
That's a fretless bass. That was what I was playing when I was playing in big bands. That's my oldest bass. That's the bass I've had for the longest. I've had that since I was in high school.
Yep.
And of course Rickenbacker and a Hofner.
Yeah, right.
Beatle bass.
Yeah, awesome.
The Rickenbacker, I call that the nerd bass because it seems like all the prog rock sort of Yes and Rush and all those bands that love those Rickenbackers. I mean, they just clang. They're great.
Yeah.
They're great fun.
Heavy?
No, light.
Yeah, right.
My one's really light.
Right.
Yeah, it's a 4003. I mean, it's a great sounding bass. I'll sometimes play that in bands where there are 2 guitarists.
Yep.
Because it takes up a different sonic space to where the Fender does.
Gotcha.
The Fender's really great if you just, if there's one guitarist, it fits really well. But if there's 2 guitarists, sometimes they can sort of clash a bit. So that the Rickenbacker seems to fit in a different.
Scooped out a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit of a richer sound in the bottom, and it's got a real clang in the top. So that's really good. And of course, the Hofner is just such an amazing sounding bass. People often think that they sound really sort of plonky or whatever. I just reckon they sound amazing. They sound like upright basses sometimes, and obviously it's the Paul McCartney thing.
Of course, yeah.
It's such a rich part of pop music and rock music history. So yeah.
Tell me about the Gilby Clarke thing.
Oh,
you played
wow.
with Gilby Clarke.
Yeah. Yeah, that was amazing. Gilby Clarke is such a gentleman.
Yeah, man. He's always been one of my favourite gunners.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Such a beautiful guy. So yeah, that was we just got the call. I mean, he had been brought out for the 5th Frankie's birthday.
So he came through Frankie's and saw you guys at Frankie's?
No. So
right.
He came out for the 5th birthday, and so we were going to be, and so we as the house band got the deal was he was going to sort of come out and play at the Frankie's 5th birthday, and we were going to be his band.
Right.
But as it turned out, he ended up doing a run of shows. So we did all the sort of East Coast sort of shows, so Brisbane, Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne, and that was. It was his music. It was it was also his music, the Guns N' Roses music, and it was just, and he sings and he plays guitar and he plays lead, and it was a really enjoyable experience playing with Gilby. I mean, when Joel and I went back to LA last year, And he, welcomed us to his house, and he was showing us around his studio, and he was taking us to gigs, and he was showing us around downtown LA and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful guy.
Cool.
Mm.
That's great. Now the Sony Music All Stars. Now, in your bio you sent me, I was just trying to make sense of all that. There's a lot of artists there. So that like a?
That was a charity single.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah. So
right.
That was a single that Sony Music had released for what was the charity? I think it's the Sony Foundation.
Right.
The Sony Foundation.
Mm.
And they needed someone with a Hofner bass to play the.
Oh right.
Because they were doing with a little help from my friends the Beatles song.
Yeah.
And the producer sent it over to me, and that was Michael Tan. Once
Right.
again, Michael Tan. He sent it over.
Now,
and
I know a guy with a Hofner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I actually sent back, that song was actually recorded, McCartney recorded that with a Ricky. So I sent it back with a Fender, with a Rickenbacker, and with a Hofner bass track. And I said, look, here's 3, choose which one you'd like. And so they ended up going with the Hofner one. But yeah, no, that was a great, but that was such a great thing to be a part of, because at the end of the day, like, it started as one thing, but soon, like, all these artists are sort of coming on board. So like Delta Goodrem came on board, and Olivia Newton-John, and John Farnham, and Guy Sebastian, and suddenly I think it started quite small but ended up being quite a massive sort of project. And yeah, I mean, Tommy Emmanuel played guitar on it, and Jack Jones, Rick Price, it's huge single. I think the project became.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
So apart from the Dami stuff coming up, what have you got coming up in the future? What about your own music?
Yeah, so with my music, I've kind of been in and out of a few bands. I mentioned before, Torch Lamont, which was the alt rock band. I was in a band called Strange Karma, in and out once again. They are, should I say, a sort of heavy rock, sort of Zeppelin, Queen sort of thing. So really my kind of thing, but that been in and out of that twice. I was in the Widowbirds up until that sort of came to an end when Simon Melly moved up to Queensland.
Yep.
And I was in a band called Battlesnake most recently. That was great fun. That was ridiculous. I mean, I actually came across Battlesnake because, do you know Paul Mason, guitar player?
I know Paul Mason.
Yeah,
Yep.
Paul and I are great mates. So, I mean, we often sort of get together and chat and play and all that kind of thing. But he said to me one day, I'm joining this band. I'm not sure if it's really my thing, but like it's a really different thing for me. And I said, what kind of thing? He said, it's a rock thing, like it's a heavy rock thing. And I was like, there's 3 guitars. And I was like, oh man, you got to do that. Anyway, so he did join it, and I went and saw them, and I thought it was one of the most ridiculous things I'd ever seen, because it is. They come out on stage, they're wearing leotards and fur coats, and they're playing this like real, like classic metal kind of thing. Like they're like the Darkness kind of, that kind of thing. And I thought it was the best thing ever. Anyway, so their bass player left to go overseas, I think, or something like that. And so they asked me, would you like to join? And I was like, oh, heck yes, definitely. So that was good fun. Unfortunately, it got to the point where we're just in, like they're a bit younger than me. They're about 10 years younger than me, all of them. So we're just in different life stages.
I understand. Yep.
Yeah. So I remember there was a point where they had like 8 gigs lined up, and I could do none of them because I had all gigs already sort of booked. And I'm not, unfortunately, in a place where I can say, cancel paid gigs in order to sort of take on these new ones. And so that was a shame. But there was the guy who then replaced me. He had already done a few shows because I had to sort of dep out a few, and so he just slotted right in. So at the end of the day, I ended up only doing one single with them, which was a song called "The Nightmare King." Nice. But they've just released another song called "The Atomic Plow." So definitely check them out on Apple Music, on Spotify.
Atomic Plow, how cool is that?
Battlesnake, yeah, Battlesnake.
Battlesnake.
Yeah, they're a great fun band.
Yeah.
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 I just saw their recent photo shoot actually, and they've gone and made Battlesnake male bikini bottoms. And they're all just wearing these white male bikini bottoms, and they're in like this pink backdrop. It looks very silly, and it's very good. Yeah.
You've got you've built your own little recording studio in your house.
I've got a bit of like a setup.
So
yes.
do you do much work out of that?
Yeah. So that's where I do all my tracking.
Yeah.
So when people send me tracks to put on, I just do it all at home. I've got a really nice preamp. I've got I pull out my my compressor and sort of just I track everything in Logic, and it's fine.
Logic's cool, man.
That's what I've done all my tracking on. It's very rare that I'd get called in to a studio.
Yep.
But
not too many left too. By the way,
still happens. For labels and that kind of thing. Sometimes they'll call you into a studio to actually track in their studio, so that you can be there in front of their producer and all that kind of thing.
Course.
But generally speaking, most of the time I just do it from home.
Mm. And how often do you get those sessions?
It varies. Sometimes they sometimes like a couple of weeks, sometimes none. So it really goes in ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played on quite a few things over the years, I guess. So you kind of lose track of these things actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess on the things that I write, I'll put out like ones that might stick out because they are actually artists, or they're things that I was more sort of involved with, like in the production side of things, or that kind of thing. So,
of course.
I mean, So, that's about building up relationships with producers and
And I was just wondering if it's a kind of a regular thing, or it's just sporadic, that kind of thing, which it usually is, isn't it?
It's generally
for most people
regularly sporadic.
Sporadic.
Yeah. Like it comes in ebbs and flows. Sometimes you'll be doing a lot of it, and then sometimes you just don't, it doesn't come at all. Yeah. But I mean, these days obviously it costs money for you to track a bass player. People just, they'll just sample it, or they'll, they'll program it in, or that kind of thing. I mean, with the new sample libraries that are coming out, a lot of people are getting replaced by sample libraries, especially drummers. Actually, drummers are. I mean, there's no good sample libraries of acoustic guitars or electric guitars. So really, that the guitar players, are pretty safe. Obviously, vocalists, you can't really replace vocalists with sample libraries. Drummers, bass players, like string sections and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like often producers they'll sample like they'll write a string section, and then they might get like one string player to come in and play on top of that,
right.
and
it gives it
just enough, because the sample library gets you maybe 95% of the way there.
Yep.
Especially with something like the Vienna Symphony or whatever have gone in and created these beautiful string libraries. But it still sounds a little bit poxy. So if you can just get one string player to play on top of that, suddenly it makes all the difference. Same with horns, same with all these kinds of things are being replaced. For me, if I was ever doing something, it's always as much as possible live, no click, no auto tune,
cool. Awesome.
no quantization, no sample libraries.
Yeah.
I really love. I really struggle listening to a lot of modern music because of the auto tune, and often I've done sessions before where I've gone into a thing, and I actually asked the producer, "Do you mind knocking off the Melodyne just while I put down my track, and then you can stick it back on?"
Right.
Because I just really dislike the way it sounds.
Right, gotcha. What about your own original stuff though? Are you writing your own stuff from home?
I'm not really too much of a songwriter.
Okay.
I'm very much someone who, I collaborate on songs.
Yep.
So if someone comes with an idea, I'll often work with them and make that into a song. What was classically called a producer.
Yep.
And these days producers are much more, they're much more complex beasts than just that.
Yep.
So the songwriting, I think, is you've got to have a certain kind of you've got to have something to sort of say, and you've got to come from a certain emotional place.
Totally.
I'm not really someone who experiences negative emotion a lot. If you know what I mean? Like I'm just not that guy. I've had some.
You make it sound like every songwriter writes negative songs.
Oh no!
I know what you're saying there.
I think you've just got to have. You've really got to be. Sometimes songwriting.
You got to feel everything, I guess.
Yeah, songwriting is a very cathartic experience for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of these songwriters, and it really helps them to articulate what is immaterial. It really sort of helps them to really sort of work through their what they're going through, and it's it is the way that they can get that into the real world and articulate it.
Understand?
I mean, I once again I love things that make me feel make me feel really really fire me up and all that kind of thing. There aren't very many things that make me cry.
Yeah, right.
But I'll tell you what, if you get the right musical situation, oh man, I'm a flood of tears.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
I mean, a few off the top of my head, Jeff Beck playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Goodness me, that gets me every time. Hearing The Show Must Go On by Queen, which is Freddie Mercury singing at the point of death.
Yeah,
he's so sick that he can hardly stand, but he's still singing better than almost every other rock and roll singer out there.
As soon as you said that, I've got that image of him in the video, almost like he's saying goodbye.
Yeah,
and it gives a. Yeah, and I think that was, basically the last time anybody saw him. Not anybody, but when he made that video, I saw a documentary about it. And that's what they were saying. It's like he's almost saying goodbye.
Yeah,
because was it like a wink or a nod, like right at the end?
Yeah, that's a song called "These Are the Days of Our Lives."
Yeah, right.
And there's a point in the video where he sort of looks up and says, "I still love you," and then flashes off to the side.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was his last appearance in a music video.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, but he's desperately sick by then.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, something really interesting. His last ever vocal take appears on the record that they released, after he had died, called Made in Heaven. But the bridge, I think it's the bridge section of a song called Mother Love, and it's a huge vocal. And as you're listening to it, you're thinking, he literally would, that last record, I believe, from what I've heard, he was so sick, and he was at the point where if wearing clothes was painful because he was just so he had pneumonia. Remember, he's dying of pneumonia, and he sings this massive vocal thing, and then on the recording there's this big taiko drum which reverbs, and it's kind of like, oh wow, that was the last thing he ever sang, and a few weeks later he was dead. So I mean, that will always get me. I mean, but any form of real like human excellence at the peak of the art form, watching Buddy Rich play drums. Goodness me, that gets me. Watching the Usain Bolt run, watching the men's 1992 Team USA basketball team. Oh man, like all these sort of things that are the absolute peak of the art form, they will always reduce me to tears.
That's awesome, man. I think on that, I don't think we could end a better way than that.
That's it, man.
Yeah. Actually, before I do that sign off, have we forgotten anything? I'll cut this bit out. So
Let me have a think. Is there anything? I mean, you kind of had a bit of a list of things there. There's probably
we've gone through all of it, plus much more.
No, I mean, I'm pretty. It was a great chat, So,
it was awesome. Yeah. No, I just like to ask, because I know, some people have sort of said afterwards, "Oh, I wish we'd talked about that." Or
let me have a quick think. So we talked about piano. We talked about me doing bass. We talked about me playing jazz in big bands. We talked about me doing sort of that audio engineering. We talked about Torch Le Monde. We talked about me working in the music store.
Yep.
if you want, we can talk about something about that, but that's another thing. Peter Northcote, Frankie's world famous house band. We talked about the Widowbirds. We talked about me working for Dami Im. We talked about
gear,
recording,
we've talked about studio stuff, basses, upright, electric.
Yeah,
all the different types of basses. I think
that's pretty comprehensive.
Pretty smashed it, eh? Yeah. Okay, I'll re-wrap it.
Sure.
It up. Well, on that, Bobby, thank you so much for coming out here again. I'm glad we got to get the full story this time, and I'm looking at my gear, and I don't know if every now and then you've been watching me looking over at my gear, seeing if anything shut off, so we don't miss anything this time. But I've got a backup as well these days. So
wow.
Yeah. So if I lose one, which I haven't since that day, nothing else has happened. So since then I haven't had a problem. So yeah, we've got everything today.
Very good.
No losses. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, sweet as, Bobby. Thanks so much again, and look forward to seeing what happens with you in the future, and I'm sure we'll be sitting here doing this again sometime.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers, Bobby.
Have a good one.
Later, bro.
Summoned from deep beneath by unholy forces unknown to mortal beings. 8 cylinders adorn his crown. Banished to the frosty wastes, the king awaits. Misty peaks, shimmering gold through the cold and icy night, long and tattered, dragging robes, magic spells.